45% of Americans could not cover a $1,000 emergency expense without going into debt. Read that again. A single car repair, one unexpected medical bill, a broken appliance at the wrong time. For nearly half the country, any of these would mean pulling out a credit card, borrowing from family, or scrambling to figure out which bills can wait another month. This is the reality most people live in. And here's what makes it worse. They know exactly what they should do about it. Everyone has heard the advice. Build an emergency fund. Save 3 to 6 months of expenses. Put something away for a rainy day. The guidance is everywhere. Yet according to the most recent Federal Reserve data, only 55% of American adults have set aside enough money to cover 3 months of expenses. 30%, almost a third of the adult population, said they could not cover 3 months of expenses by any means. Selling assets, borrowing from family, draining retirement accounts, none of it would be enough. The standard financial advice frames cash reserves as protection against emergencies, insurance against the unexpected, a safety net for when things go wrong. That framing is accurate, but incomplete. Cash does protect you from emergencies, but the real power of having cash sitting in an account goes far deeper than emergency protection. It fundamentally changes how you think, how you negotiate, and how you make decisions across every area of your life. Nobody explains this part. Let me show you what I mean. Researchers at Princeton and Harvard studied what happens to the human brain under conditions of financial scarcity. Their findings, published in a landmark study called Scarcity, Why Having Too Little Means So Much, revealed something disturbing. Financial stress doesn't just make you worried, it literally reduces your cognitive capacity. When your brain is consumed with financial anxiety, wondering how you'll pay rent, calculating whether you can afford groceries, mentally juggling which bills are due when, you have less mental bandwidth available for everything else. Complex decisions become harder. Long-term planning feels impossible. You default to short-term thinking because your brain is too overwhelmed to process anything beyond the immediate crisis. The researchers called this phenomenon tunneling. Your focus narrows to the problem directly in front of you, and everything outside that tunnel gets ignored. The promotion you should be positioning yourself for, the health issue you should get checked out, the investment you should be making in your future, all of it fades into background noise, while your brain burns energy trying to survive the current month. This isn't weakness or lack of willpower. It's a measurable, documented effect of financial pressure on cognitive function. Now consider the opposite scenario. Imagine you have 6 months of expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account earning 4% interest. You know exactly where the money is. You know you could access it within days if needed. That knowledge doesn't disappear when you go to work, when you're negotiating a raise, or when you're deciding whether to take a calculated risk. That cushion of cash does something profound to your psychology. It removes the constant background hum of financial anxiety. It frees up mental bandwidth for strategic thinking, creative problem solving, and long-term planning. It lets you operate from a position of security rather than desperation. This psychological shift affects every decision you make, often in ways you don't consciously recognize. Consider how cash changes your relationship with your employer. The average duration of unemployment in the United States right now is approximately 23 weeks, nearly 6 months from job loss to new employment. That's the average. Many people take longer. If you're in your 50s, if you work in a specialized field, if you're changing industries, the timeline stretches further. Without cash reserves, this reality creates invisible chains. You stay in a toxic job because you can't afford the gap between paychecks. You tolerate a manager who undermines you because the alternative feels too risky. You accept below-market compensation because the idea of job searching while unemployed terrifies you more than being underpaid. Think about 2 people in identical roles at the same company. Same title, same responsibilities, same manager. One has 8 months of expenses saved. The other is living paycheck to paycheck. When annual reviews come around, both ask for raises. The person with savings can afford to be patient. They can push back on the initial offer, cite market rates, request another conversation. If the company refuses, they can start job searching without panic, waiting for the right opportunity rather than grabbing the first one. The The person without savings operates from a completely different psychology. Every negotiation carries the weight of potential disaster. Pushing too hard feels dangerous. The ask becomes smaller. The acceptance comes faster. The settling happens almost automatically. Over a 10-year career, the difference in outcomes between these two people, identical in skills, experience, and work ethic, could easily reach 6 figures in cumulative earnings. The cash cushion pays for itself many times over, purely through the negotiating confidence it provides. Cash reserves invert the power dynamic. When you know you could survive 6 months without income, every conversation with your employer changes. Salary negotiations feel less desperate because walking away is actually viable. You push back on unreasonable demands because losing this particular job wouldn't destroy you. You take calculated risks, speaking up in meetings, proposing bold ideas, disagreeing with leadership when appropriate, because financial ruin isn't hiding behind every misstep. You might never actually need to quit. The point is that you could, and that knowledge radiates through everything you do. The negotiating power of cash extends far beyond employment. Researchers at UC San Diego analyzed millions of home transactions and discovered something remarkable. All cash home buyers pay an average of 10% less than buyers who need mortgage financing. In 2025, that discount reached 9% across the broader market, up from 4% just 4 years earlier. Think about what that means at current home prices. The median home in America costs roughly $410,000. A 9% cash discount translates to nearly $37,000 in savings. That's not a coupon or a special deal. It's the premium sellers charge for the uncertainty of dealing with finance buyers. Why do sellers accept less money from cash buyers? Certainty, speed, reduced risk. Mortgage transactions fail roughly 5 to 6% of the time. The buyer's financing falls through, the appraisal comes in low, insurance complications arise at the last minute. Each of these scenarios forces the seller back to square one, relisting the property, scheduling new showings, waiting for another offer that might also collapse. Cash eliminates these variables. The buyer either has the money or they don't. No bank approval required. No appraisal anxiety. Closing happens in days rather than weeks. For sellers who've already purchased their next home, who are paying carrying costs on an empty property, or who simply want the process finished, this reliability is worth accepting less money. Obviously, most people can't pay cash for a home. The point is that having cash fundamentally changes your negotiating position across countless transactions. When your car breaks down and you need replacement transportation, cash gives you options. You can buy from a private seller offering a better price. You can negotiate without worrying about financing approval. You can walk away from a bad deal because you're not desperate for whatever terms a dealer offers. When you're renting an apartment, landlords notice when someone can pay several months up front. When you're hiring contractors for home repairs, cash payments sometimes unlock discounts they wouldn't offer otherwise. When you're negotiating with any creditor, your position improves dramatically when you're not borrowing from them. Cash is leverage, and leverage compounds across hundreds of small interactions throughout your life. But there's another dimension that rarely gets discussed. People without cash pay what economists call a poverty premium, a hidden tax on financial instability that makes everything more expensive. Consider the mechanics of daily life without a financial cushion. You can't buy in bulk when items go on sale because you don't have the cash for larger upfront purchases. So you pay more per unit week after week. You can't pay annual insurance premiums, which typically offer 5 to 15% discounts over monthly payments. So you pay the higher monthly rate, effectively a fee for not having cash available. You can't maintain your car proactively, replacing tires before they're bald, fixing small issues before they become catastrophic. So minor problems become emergency repairs at emergency prices. You can't shop around because time pressure dominates every decision. You need the thing now. You can't wait for a sale or compare prices across vendors. You can't take advantage of employer benefits that require upfront investment, contributing enough to get the full 401k match using flexible spending accounts. The guaranteed returns sit there unclaimed because you can't afford the cash flow disruption. Add these premiums together, and the annual cost of being broke easily reaches thousands of dollars. The less money you have, the more you pay for the same goods and services. Cash reserves eliminate the poverty premium entirely. When you have money available, you can optimize every purchase for value rather than urgency. The emergency fund doesn't just protect against emergencies, it stops the daily bleeding that most people don't even realize is happening. Here's another angle that almost never gets mentioned. Cash isn't just protection against bad things happening. It's the ability to capture good things when they appear. Opportunities rarely arrive on a convenient schedule. The perfect job opening happens when it happens. The investment chance comes when the market crashes, not when your portfolio is ready. The business opportunity needs capital now, not 6 months from now when you've saved up. Without cash reserves, you miss these windows constantly. The stock market drops 30%, and everyone with cash is buying at historic discounts. You're sitting on the sidelines because you have nothing to deploy. 2 years later, the market has recovered, and those buyers have locked in massive gains while you watched. A friend offers you a chance to invest in their business at favorable terms. The opportunity is genuine. The numbers make sense. You can't participate because you have no capital available. A piece of real estate comes available below market value because the seller needs to close quickly. You can't move fast enough. The property goes to someone who could. These moments happen throughout life. Most people experience them as frustrations, things they wish they could do but can't. People with cash reserves experience them as options, things they can choose to pursue based on actual merit rather than financial constraint. Over a lifetime, the difference between missing opportunities and capturing them creates enormous gaps in outcomes. But here's the part that most financial advice completely misses. Cash doesn't just give you negotiating power in explicit transactions, it gives you the ability to think clearly about every decision, including decisions where no one is sitting across the table from you. Consider how financial stress affects major life choices. Should you go back to school for additional credentials? Without cash reserves, the analysis gets distorted. The upfront costs loom larger. The period of reduced income feels more threatening. The long-term benefits get discounted because your brain is struggling to process anything beyond the immediate strain. Should you leave a relationship that isn't working? Financial entanglement makes this harder than it should be. Shared leases, combined expenses, the cost of starting over alone, all of these factors carry extra weight when you have no financial cushion. Should you move to a new city with better opportunities? The logistics become paralyzing when you can't afford the gap between selling your old life and establishing your new one. In each case, the correct decision gets clouded by financial fear. You end up making choices based on short-term financial constraints rather than long-term life satisfaction. And over time, these distorted decisions compound into a life that feels smaller than it should be. Cash removes the financial fear from the equation. It lets you evaluate decisions based on their actual merits, career trajectory, relationship health, life opportunity, rather than filtering everything through the lens of, can I afford the risk? So how do you actually build this cash cushion? The standard recommendation is 3 to 6 months of expenses. For someone spending $5,000 monthly, that's $15,000 to $30,000. The range sounds enormous until you realize it's simply the product of consistent behavior over time. Start with a specific target. Calculate your actual monthly expenses: rent or mortgage, utilities, food, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments. Multiply by 3. That's your initial goal. 6 months comes later. Build automatically. Set up a recurring transfer from checking to savings on the same day your paycheck hits. The amount matters less than the consistency. $200 per month becomes $2,400 per year. $500 monthly becomes $6,000 annually. The numbers add up faster than you expect when the behavior is automated. Put the money somewhere it can grow. High-yield savings accounts currently offer rates around 4 to 5% APY, more than 10 times the national average of 0.39%. On $20,000, that's roughly $800 to $1,000 in annual interest rather than $78. The money is still liquid, still accessible within days, still FDIC insured up to $250,000. You're just getting paid for holding it. Make the money slightly inconvenient to access. This isn't about hiding it from yourself. It's about adding just enough friction that impulsive spending becomes less likely. A separate bank from your checking account with no linked debit card accomplishes this beautifully. When you want the money, you can get it. You just have to initiate a transfer and wait a day or two. That delay stops most frivolous withdrawals before they happen. Define what counts as emergency versus what doesn't. A genuine emergency threatens your health, housing, or employment. A great sale on something you want is not an emergency. Being bored or stressed is not an emergency. New restaurant opening nearby, not an emergency. Clear definitions prevent the slow erosion of funds through death by 1,000 rationalizations. The progression of financial security looks something like this. First, you stop the bleeding. Build $1,000 to $2,000 in immediately accessible cash. This stops the cycle of credit card emergencies, overdraft fees, and payday loans. For roughly half of Americans, reaching this level would already represent a significant improvement. Second, you build the real buffer. Grow that initial cushion to 3 months of expenses. At this level, a job loss becomes stressful rather than catastrophic. A medical issue becomes manageable rather than ruinous. You've bought yourself time to respond rather than react. Third, you reach genuine security. 6 months of expenses or more. This is where the psychology truly shifts. You're no longer operating from scarcity. You're making decisions from a position of strength. The mental bandwidth previously consumed by financial anxiety gets redirected toward building the life you actually want. The timeline depends entirely on your income, expenses, and intensity of focus. Some people reach 6 months in a year. Others take 3 to 5 years. The duration matters less than the direction. Every month you add to your cushion increases your options and reduces your stress. There's a counter-argument worth addressing. Some people argue that cash sitting in a savings account is lazy money. They point out that investing would generate higher returns. Why let $30,000 earn 4% when it could earn 10% in the stock market? The math is accurate. Over long periods, invested money significantly outpaces money in savings accounts. But this argument confuses two entirely different purposes. Your emergency fund is not an investment. Its job is not to maximize returns. Its job is to be available, stable, and accessible when you need it most. Markets can drop 30% in a matter of weeks. We saw exactly that in March 2020. If your emergency fund is invested and your job disappears during a market crash, you'd be forced to sell at the worst possible time. Your cushion would provide far less protection than you planned for. Cash is different. The number in your account today is the number that will be there tomorrow. No variance, no timing risk. No need to worry about what the market is doing when your car transmission fails. Think of it this way. You don't ask your house's foundation to generate investment returns. You ask it to hold the structure up. Your emergency fund is your financial foundation. Let it do its job. Once your cash cushion is fully funded, absolutely direct additional savings toward investments. But the cushion comes first. It's the prerequisite that makes all other financial risk-taking possible. The cost of not having cash is rarely a single dramatic event. More often, it's an accumulation of compromises. You stay at the company that underpays you because you can't afford a job search. You accept the first offer instead of negotiating because you need the certainty. You skip the medical checkup because the copay feels like too much this month. You put the emergency on a credit card, then pay 22% interest for years. You pass on the training that would advance your career because the upfront cost is prohibitive. Each compromise feels small in isolation. Together, they create a trajectory. 5 years later, you're behind where you should be in income, in health, in career progression, in life satisfaction. And you can trace the gap back to countless moments where fear of financial instability drove your decisions. Cash reserves break this pattern. They give you the space to make decisions based on what's actually right rather than what's immediately cheapest. They let you invest in yourself, negotiate confidently, take calculated risks, and recover gracefully when things go wrong. The emergency fund isn't just protection against catastrophe. It's permission to live strategically instead of defensively. The path forward is simple, but not easy. Calculate your monthly expenses honestly. Set your target at 3 months, then 6. Automate the savings so consistency doesn't require willpower. Put the money in a high-yield account where it grows while waiting. Protect it from yourself by adding slight friction to access. Then, watch what happens. Watch how your thinking shifts when the cushion builds. Notice how negotiations feel different when walking away is viable. Pay attention to the decisions you make from security rather than desperation. The specific dollar amount matters less than the psychological transformation. At some point during this process, different for everyone, you'll realize that your relationship with money has fundamentally changed. You'll stop operating from scarcity. You'll start operating from choice. That shift is worth more than any emergency the fund might cover.